Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the fantasy football Week 16 wide receiver rankings. So as we end up in Week 16 of the fantasy football season, many of you are either in your championship games and or maybe perhaps you're playing in Week 16 semifinals, looking to try to get to your Week 17 championships. Either way, we're going to be talking about the wide receiver position. To begin, I'm going to be going over the best and worst matchups at the wide receiver position as we enter Week 16 of the fantasy football season, kind of giving you my thoughts on how specific matchups can affect player outcomes, on how many fantasy points they could potentially score this week. And then after that, we're going to be going over my 1 through 36 wide receiver rankings as we usually do, giving you my thoughts and opinions on the wide receivers going into Week 16. And that's pretty much it. Now, before we begin, I just want to go ahead and remind everybody that this Saturday and Sunday, I will be having live streams here on my YouTube channel. So to begin, on Saturday, we are going to have a live stream from 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm in California, so Pacific Standard Time, so set your clocks. I'm pretty sure there's a countdown as of right now for the Saturday live stream. I'm going to be answering questions for specific lineups and or any other questions you guys have, whether it has to do with next season, stuff that doesn't have to do with fantasy football. It doesn't matter. We're going to be hanging out, talking fantasy football, talking life. So if you want to come and go ahead and join us, that's the time. Also, on Sunday morning, we will also have another lineup kind of question, live stream from 8:30 to 9:45 a.m. Again, this is Pacific Standard Time. Do not forget. So those are the two times that we will be streaming this weekend. If you'd like to go ahead and join us, that'd be great. So, hey, everybody. How's it going? Hope everyone's doing well. Okay, so as we get into Week 16 of the fantasy football playoffs, we sit here and we're going to talk about the matchups at the wide receiver position. I don't want to spend too much time on the matchups because then again, I'm going to reiterate myself as I continue and I go into the rankings. So let's try to keep this to a minimal level, Andrew, shall we? Okay, here we go. So number one, giving up the most points to the wide receiver position, it is the Saints. Now, I think this is just a blown out of proportions number. Initially looking at it, the last 6 weeks, the Saints have only allowed they've only been giving up 12 points per game to opposing teams, right? Yes, that doesn't have to do with the wide receivers and how many points they score, but the wide receivers against the Saints have not been great as of the last 6 weeks, to be honest. So as of right now, I think this is a little blown up. This has a lot to do with the shootouts that they were partaking in the first half of the season. So this may be a little bit off, but as of right now, playing against the Steelers this week, I still expect Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster to have good weeks, but I don't think they're going to have the best matchup per se, even though it says that they're giving up the most points. As of the last 6 weeks, this defense has turned a new leaf and become really elite as they get into the playoffs. All right, number two, giving up the second most points to the wide receiver position. We have here, okay, there you go, that's better. We have the Philadelphia Eagles. So as of right now, who plays the Philadelphia Eagles? It is Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, Demaryius Thomas, and the Houston Texans this week, right? So of those three players, they should all three perform this coming week. They have a great matchup. The only thing that worries me a little bit, the pass rush that the Jets were getting last week, that was a little scary, right? The offensive line of the Houston Texans did not look good. They haven't been good all season long, yet they've managed to survive. This coming week against the Eagles could put some pass rush on them, but I still expect DeAndre Hopkins to take advantage of this week matchup. Moving on to number three, the Jets. Speaking of DeAndre Hopkins, he ended up scoring 2 touchdowns against the Jets last week. This week, the same thing is going to happen with Davante Adams and the Packers. As of right now, many people are questioning whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to continue to play this season, considering they are no longer eligible to make the playoffs. They have been mathematically eliminated. With the news coming out earlier today that Cam Newton is going to be sitting for the rest of the season due to a shoulder injury, many people were wondering, hey, can I trust, not Andrew Luck. Can I trust Aaron Rodgers or Matt Ryan? Guys like that are no longer going to make the playoffs, but don't really have anything to play for. As of right now, we know that Aaron Rodgers will be playing this week. He came out and said that he would be. So Davante Adams He's gonna be a really great receiver against that Jets secondary this week. The next best matchup is the 49ers secondary, giving up a lot of points to the wide receiver position, and I think Mitchell Trubisky is going to be able to take advantage of that. This past week, Mitchell Trubisky threw for 2 passing touchdowns, one to Trey Burton and one to Tariq Cohen. Yes, that doesn't technically doesn't mean that it was in the secondary and the corners were giving up a bunch of points, but I still think Mitchell Trubisky is capable of taking advantage of a weaker secondary just as long as Allen Robinson and guys like Taylor Gabriel, Anthony Miller could step up. I'm sure he can deliver them the ball. Moving on to the next best matchup, we have the Green Bay Packers giving up a lot of points. Now, Sam Bradford, I always do that. Sam Darnold last week came out. Him and Robby Anderson looked good together. Chris Herndon was used a little bit within that offense as well through the passing game. So Robby Anderson, is a guy to keep your eye out on, especially because of the fact that the Packers are really giving up a lot of points thus far this season through the air. All right, moving on. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as we all know, have been terrible all season long. In the part of just defensively, decision-making when it comes to the coaches, that entire organization is a mess right now, right? But as of the matchup for this week for the wide receivers, Amari Cooper is pretty much the only guy that is going to be able to take advantage of such matchup. He did not play well this past week, Amari Cooper, that is, but I think he'll be able to turn it around against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are giving up nearly 32 points per game to the wide receiver position. It's going to be an easy game for him. Moving on, the Carolina Panthers without Cam Newton. Can we even trust any of the players there? I still think Christian McCaffrey is going to have value. But other than him, we'll talk about wide receivers. But who's playing against the Panthers this week? It's the Falcons. Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, they're going to get after it. And I think they're going to be fantasy relevant this week. And they should be able to take care of that matchup. Even though, the Panthers did play tough against the Saints. But the Saints have not been like themselves, right? The last couple weeks offensively, they have just been stagnant. They have been atrocious, to be honest, comparatively to what they were earlier in the season. So either way, I still think the Falcons could take advantage of this matchup. Moving on, the next best matchup, the Tennessee Titans cornerbacks, right? We know that they're not great, but I'm pretty sure that the Redskins are not going to be able to take advantage of that. I know Josh Johnson has been pretty decent. They've got they picked up a win last week somehow, as they sit at 7-7. That team would have a better record if Alex Smith was still healthy, but that team, they don't really have any wide receivers. They don't really have an offensive line. They're beat up, and defensively is where they're getting majority of their plays done. So as of right now, the Washington Redskins, the Washington Redskins are not going to be able to take advantage of that on Saturday. So the Tennessee Titans secondary, nothing to worry about. But on the other side, we have the Washington Redskins giving up the 9th most points to the wide receiver position. Even with that being said, I really don't trust Corey Davis. This team has turned into a run-first and run-only team. We've seen Marcus Mariota pass for less than 100 yards in the last 2 games, so I expect him to maintain with that offensive mindset of running the ball consistently every single down and keep the ball out of Mariota's hands as we go forward. Moving on, number 10, the Kansas City Chiefs. I expect Doug Baldwin, who had a fantastic week this last week, and Tyler Lockett to take advantage of this. This is going to be a shootout. These are two teams vying for their spots. The Kansas City Chiefs want to be the number 1 seed in the AFC, and the Seattle Seahawks, who had a very brutal loss this past week against the 49ers, they're still trying to make the playoffs. Yes, they have 8 wins, but it's going to take more than 8 wins to make the playoffs, so they need to pick up a win. This is going to be a shootout, in my opinion, and I think the wide receivers of the Seattle Seahawks are going to be able to take advantage of that. Moving on, the Cleveland Browns, wide receiver, giving them a lot of points to the wide receiver position. Here's the thing. Tyler Boyd, he's probably not going to play this week. So who is Jeff Driscoll going to throw the ball to? Really, there's not really much. Erickson, Ross, these are not guys that you can trust playing in your championship week. So there's nothing really that you could take advantage of within that matchup. Moving on, the Falcons. Yep, okay, great. You get to play against the second-string quarterback of the Panthers. I'm not buying into it. Let's move on. The Chicago Bears, they're giving up some points. Now, Nick Mullins and Dante Pettis, they have been a great number 1 and 2 combo, the 1-2 punch of that offense, in fact. So as of right now, I think Dante Pettis is not a bad play, especially, if Nick Mullins is going to be in that garbage time scenario and situation, which he has to throw the ball continuously to get them out of their deficit. It's not a bad play to get Dante Pettis out there. Moving on, the Detroit Lions. I'm pretty sure I think the Vikings play the Detroit Lions this week. Let me go ahead and confirm that. I don't know why I'm doubting it. I'm pretty sure it's the Vikings versus the Lions this week. Let me go ahead and confirm that. Yes, it is the Vikings versus Lions. I don't know why I questioned myself, but either way, when you see the rankings of the Vikings receivers, you'll get a better idea on what I think about this matchup. I think it's a good matchup, right? But to be honest, where has Adam Thielen been? I don't know, but I think I know where he's going to be this week, somewhere near my bench. I'll tell you that much. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks giving up the 15th most points. They're average, right? The difference between the Seattle Seahawks giving up points and the Cardinals is not even 1.5 points, right? So really, all things considered, it's not really much of a difference. But again, they get to play against Patrick Mahomes in that deadly offense. So if Tyreek Hill's healthy, he could cause some damage there. Cincinnati Bengals playing against Baker Mayfield and the Browns. That's not a bad play. Those wide receivers, depending on who you play, really you never know who's going to catch a touchdown for that team. That's the only issue. The Rams giving up some points to the wide receiver position. I don't care. I don't want to touch any of those. Unless it's Larry Legend, Fitzgerald, I'm really not interested in any Cardinals wide receivers this week. The Denver Broncos, okay, great. The Raiders, maybe Jordy Nelson's not a bad play. The Miami Dolphins, nope. I don't think there's a single Jacksonville receiver I want to play. The Pittsburgh Steelers, yada, yada. Okay. Who's giving up the least points to the wide receiver position? The Jacksonville Jaguars are continuously doing so. So Kenny Stills this week, Devontae Parker, Danny Amendola, no thank you to all three of them. The Minnesota Vikings, they play against the wide receivers of the Detroit Lions this week. The last time they played against Matthew Stafford, I don't know if you guys recall this, but they sacked him 6 times in a single game. I think they broke the franchise. I think it was more than 6 times. I think they broke a franchise record for sure for sacks in a game. They're going to get after Matthew Stafford. And Kenny Golladay, yeah, he showed up this past week, but he hasn't been consistent. And when they put Xavier Rhodes on him, he's going to have a hell of a time. The Cowboys playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm pretty sure Jameis will be able to let the ball go. I'm sure Mike Evans will find himself some value. The Baltimore Ravens playing against the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm pretty sure Phillip Rivers at this point is matchup proof, but is Keenan Allen going to be healthy? Will Mike Williams step up into that number 1 wide receiver spot? Those are the questions that we'll answer. The Indianapolis Colts, with OBJ gone, they have nothing to worry about. The Bills playing tough against the wide receiver position because truly the Bills are just giving up all their points on the ground. But either way, we'll go over everything. These are the matchups that we just wanted to gloss over really quickly, and let's get into the rankings, shall we? Let's do that. All right, here we go. Okay, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so as of right now, rankings obviously are subject to change, but if you play inconsistently, you are not going to be rewarded on this rankings list because of it, okay? Just off the base, you just look at Michael Thomas. You're sitting at 9. Why? Because you haven't been Michael Thomas in the last couple weeks. Can I trust you? I'm not really sure I could. So it's just tough to do so. Either way, let's start at the top. We're going to talk about Davante Adams of the Green Bay Packers playing against the Jets. Jets giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. We saw DeAndre Hopkins score 10 receptions, 170-plus receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. I expect Davante Adams to do something similar. Obviously, the stat line might not look the same, but Davante Adams, who's been consistent all season long, despite the matchup, he's matchup proof because he is Aaron Rodgers' number 1 wide receiver. And going into this matchup, I expect him to feast and have himself a great fantasy week. He's my number 1 wide receiver. Number 2, we have Antonio Brown playing against the Saints defense. I mentioned before, the Saints defense, yes, they are giving up the most points to the wide receiver position, but it may be a little inflated because of how much they gave up in the beginning of the season. Either way, I think Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger are going to continue to find each other within this offense. James Conner is not a for sure play this week. As I mentioned before, if you own Jalen Samuels, you might need to keep him on your roster because he's not looking good and he may not play this week. So it may cause them to have to throw the ball more, and Antonio Brown is the guy to pick up those extra catches here and there. He's my number 2. Number 3, we have Julio Jones playing against the Panthers. Because of the fact that Cam Newton is not there, I think this is going to be a one-sided matchup. I expect the Falcons to just completely steamroll the Panthers this coming week. So Julio Jones, who's been as consistent as ever, he's my number 3. Number 4, DeAndre Hopkins, a guy that had a great week last week, but he plays against the Eagles. Now, I mentioned before, he may struggle because of the fact that Deshaun Watson is going to be under a lot of pressure due to the D-line of the Eagles. But either way, I think DeAndre Hopkins, all you got to do is throw up the ball. You got to throw it in his direction, give him an opportunity. He's going to go and make a play on the ball. And he's my number 4 playing against a weak Eagles secondary as of right now. All right, moving on to number 5, T.Y. Hilton playing against the Giants this week. The Giants second, I expect them to run the ball a lot. Marlon Mack is going to get his fair share of touches, but on top of that, T.Y. Hilton this week, he's the number 1 wide receiver of this offense. He's looked great all season long. He had a little bit of a hiccup this last week in terms of points, but then again, he still broke 10 fantasy points. I think he had about 11 plus. So either way, I expect him to have a better matchup or a better performance than he did last week because they're not going to key in on running the ball so much because they know. The Giants know, that's where they're weakest at, so they need to be able to protect themselves there. Either way, T.Y. Hilton, he's my number 5. I have a lot of confidence in him this week. Number 6, we have Juju Smith-Schuster. Like I mentioned before, Antonio Brown is going to get a lot of touches if James Conner's gone, and I believe the same thing with Juju Smith-Schuster. Both these guys, they didn't have great games this last week, especially against a weaker defense like the Patriots, but Jalen Samuels was able to pick up a lot there. Going against the Saints, right? We know that the Saints don't give up anything on the ground. Against the running back position, they are one of the best, right? Top 5 for sure. But against the wide receiver position, that's where Ben Roethlisberger and these 2 wide receivers are going to have to figure it out. Juju's my number 6 this week. Number 7, we have Tyreek Hill. The only reason Tyreek Hill's as low as he is because he's very boom or bust. I'm expecting him to be in your lineups this week, but we all know the downside and the upside to him. He's a 38-point plus kind of guy on the upside, and he can, end up with 16 or he can end up with 5. We obviously want the other 2 higher upside plays, but either way, we're starting him up. He's my number 7. Number 8, Stefon Diggs, the lone producing receiver on this team. Adam Thielen is nowhere to be found. So Stefon Diggs, he's pretty much stepped up as the number 1 wide receiver in the last couple weeks. So he's my number 8 this week, playing against the secondary of the Lions that really isn't that great, and I think they can be taken advantage of. So as of right now, Stefon Diggs, you're my number 8. Should be great. Moving on to number 9, Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas, you haven't been great. You've been subpar to say the least comparatively to what you were earlier this season. I think it has a lot to do with the offense as a whole, just not being able to produce, and Drew Brees not getting you the ball enough. So as of right now, Michael Thomas, you've taken a little bit of a dip, but you're going to sit at number 9. You're still a wide receiver 1 in my heart and in my opinion. So you'll sit at number 9. Number 10, we have Amari Cooper playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary. You couldn't ask for a better matchup if you own Amari Cooper. So, yes, he may have struggled this past week, but the week prior, he got you 40 points. It's going to happen. They're volatile players. There are a lot of players that are very inconsistent in the NFL, and that's just how it works. But this week, with such a great matchup and being the number 1 wide receivers of the Cowboys offense, I expect him to be good. He's my number 10 wide receiver. Moving on to number 11, I have a little asterisk next to Keenan Allen because I truly don't know if he's going to play or not. If he does, I like him. Either way, despite the matchup against the Ravens, I still think he will find himself some value. It is going to be at the Chargers' home stadium this week, so he's not going to have to travel. He's not going to have to worry about that. He's just got to get healthy. I think he's going to be able to play because, the last time they played was a Thursday night game. So he's going to have over 10 days of rest. So as of right now, I think he'll be fine. He's my number 11 this week. Number 12, we have Doug Baldwin playing against Kansas City Chiefs. They themselves give up a lot of points to the wide receiver position. And this offense, they're going to run the ball all over the Kansas City Chiefs. But when they want to throw, Doug Baldwin's looked healthy. He's gotten more and more involved as the weeks have gone by. And by all means, he has looked great. So, he could end up showing up and not having any points because all the Seahawks do is run the ball. But I think Doug Baldwin, he's going to continue to get into that number 1 wide receiver role as the weeks progress and this team tries to make a playoff push. Moving on to number 13, Julian Edelman. He's literally the only consistent part of the Patriots offense, period. He is the only consistent part. So as of right now, I think comparatively to guys like Josh Gordon, Gronkowski, and whatever other receivers they have here. I think Edelman is a for sure, wide receiver 2 going forward, if not a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1. The production that he's had, especially in PPR formats, the amount of targets and touches he sees on a weekly basis is nothing to mess around with. And I think going forward, we can trust it even into a Bills matchup. I think he'll be fine. He's my number 13 this coming week. Number 14, Alshon Jeffery. I mentioned it last week. Nick Foles has a great rapport with Ertz and Alshon Jeffery. Why? Because last season when Carson Wentz went down, he came in, he took over, and those were the 2 guys that he used at a premium. He continuously fed both those guys the ball on a downly basis. This last week, we saw Alshon Jeffery used more than we ever have all season long with Carson Wentz and even with Nick Foles in the beginning of the season. If this continues to be, Alshon Jeffery owners, wow, you're going to be happy with the performances we see. This week, they play against the Houston Texans. A little bit of a tougher matchup, but I'm not really afraid of it. Alshon Jeffery's a big body, and if Foles continues to look for him, I think he'll be great. All right, moving on to number 15, Mike Evans. Played against the Dallas Cowboys defense this week. Mike Evans had a tough matchup this past week. Played against the Ravens, put up 140 receiving yards. Now, there have been easy matchups in which Mike Evans had put up 5 points. It really depends on whether or not Jameis Winston can play well. He did not play well this last week. In fact, I think he threw for 50% passing completion. He couldn't find his targets. So as of right now, Mike Evans, I still have trust in him because he's the number 1 wide receiver of a specific offense. And I think the Cowboys, yes, they're going to try to turn things around, but Mike Evans is good enough to where he can handle his own despite the matchup. Moving on to number 16, Robert Woods. These Rams offense is it's terrible. Goff is literally killing the passing offense of the Rams. Now, for those of you who own Brandin Cooks, Robert Woods, Josh Reynolds, it is apparent that without Cooper Kupp, he looks like a rookie. Jared Goff looks like a rookie. So Robert Woods, who is consistently a top 12 wide receiver, we're going to move him down to 16. It's an easier matchup. I think they'll be able to take care of themselves here against the Cardinals, but still, it's very risky, especially on what they've been doing the last couple weeks. Just not looking good. Moving on to 17, Tyler Lockett, the other receiver on the Seattle Seahawks offense. They play against the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are going to give up a bunch of points, and I expect Lockett to be able to take advantage of that. So he's my number 17. Number 18, we have Robby Anderson playing against the Packers. If Sam Darnold continues to use Robby Anderson as the number 1 target within this offense, he's going to find value. The Packers are giving up a bunch of points to the wide receiver position and, in fact, to the quarterback position in the last 5 weeks. So as of right now, Robby Anderson is not a bad play. I shunned him away last week, but I'm inviting him with open arms. I've opened the front door. I said, welcome. Sit down. Let me get you some Arnold Palmer. I'll get you some cookies. No big deal. All right, number 19, we have Adam Thielen. Yes, Adam Thielen, you get to sit right here. You get to sit at my number 19 spot. Man, I really don't trust him. It's an easy matchup, but that being said, Darius Slay could get after him, could make his life a living hell. So, can I trust Adam Thielen? Jeez, that's a great question. Thank goodness none of my leagues that are still alive have Adam Thielen in it, so I don't have to make that decision. But I think at 19, it kind of gives you a better idea. There's 18 better guys. Hopefully you have at least 2 of those guys, so you don't really have to worry about touching Adam Thielen unless you're playing him in the flex, in which you have upside and or the volatility of the downside. Number 20, Kenny Golladay. Into a pretty tough matchup this last week against the Bills. Still ended up being great. Why? Because he's the number 1 wide receiver of that offense. He stole a bunch of touches and targets. And to be honest, I 100% expect them to do the same. If they don't, okay, great. We have Kenny Golladay from 3 weeks ago. But I'm hoping that Matthew Stafford can hopefully drop back in the pocket, have enough time to throw the ball, and get it to Kenny Golladay. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of trouble for this Lions offense coming into this week. Number 21, we have Brandin Cooks. Where's Cooks been? Just same story as Adam Thielen. Where's Cooks been? I have no clue. I expect, it's just all Jared Goff's fault. Pretty much. It really is. There's nothing Cooks can do different. If he's going to get triple covered and he's not going to get the targets, well then, it's not really on him. Maybe the offense needs to begin to change because teams have really figured out what the Rams are doing, and they're playing them tough. So either way, let's go ahead and move on. The number 22, Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon, the fact that he is just not seeing touches into decent matchups, into games in which they need to win. Like, if you're down and you're the Patriots and Josh Gordon is not continuously getting targets, there's something wrong. So, I mean, obviously there's Gronk and there's Michelle and there's Chris Hogan that somehow scored a touchdown this last week. There's too many mouths to feed. So, Josh Gordon, yes, he's a top 24 play, top 22 in fact. But I'm just a little skeptical on him. Going into number 23, we have Allen Robinson into a pretty easy matchup against the 49ers. Allen Robinson had a great matchup this past week. Wasn't able to take advantage of that. And really none of the wide receivers of the Bears were able to take advantage of that. So going into this week, I think there's a good chance that he could. But is he going to? You never know. You never know. That's why he's a low-end wide receiver too, comparatively to these other guys. I think if I'm going to play a guy like Allen Robinson or Brandin Cooks, I'd rather play Brandin Cooks. Why? Because at least I've seen Brandin Cooks be productive this season. I've seen only one good game out of Allen Robinson all season long. All right, moving on to number 24, Mike Williams. Hopefully, that performance from last week will enforce, hey, we got to spread the ball more. Keenan Allen can not only be the only receiver that's getting the ball. Hopefully, Mike Williams will be able to, be decent this week, see at least 6+ targets this week in order to keep him fantasy relevant. But either way, he is the red zone target within this offense, whether Keenan Allen is there or not. So I like Mike Williams at my number 24. All right, moving on to 25. Robert Foster of the Bills, a guy that has just been lighting up in the last 5 weeks, has had 10 or more fantasy points in 4 out of the last 5. He's just incredible. And as of right now, on how well Josh Allen has been playing, obviously he's not throwing the ball too accurately, but he's finding Robert Foster, and that's all that really matters. So if he's sitting on your waivers, he's a good play as a wide receiver 3 flex this week. Moving on to 26, we have Dante Pettis into a decent Bears matchup. I understand the Bears defense is scary, but their secondary gives up points. And if Nick Mullins drops back and continuously feeds the ball to Dante Pettis, like we've seen him do in the last, 4+ weeks, Dante Pettis is going to have value, so he's my number 26. Number 27, playing against the Eagles, Demaryius Thomas on the opposite side of DeAndre Hopkins should be able to find some value. As of right now, he looks a little slower, he looks a little older. Obviously, he's not at prime play as of right now, but I still think Demaryius Thomas presents a lot of value because of how good the matchup is and because he is the number 2 wide receiver on this offense that is going into an easier matchup. So I expect him to do pretty decently. He's my number 27. Number 28, the only wide receiver of the Broncos that I'm going to trust is DaeSean Hamilton this week. I like Tim Patrick, but to be honest, he's not as consistent or he's not getting as many targets. So between the two, we're just going to go with DaeSean Hamilton. It really is a toss-up between those two, but comparatively, I like Hamilton more. Playing against the Raiders this week, it's not a bad matchup. I would have, pointed out, Tyler Boyd had a pretty decent week until he got injured last week against the Raiders defense. But the Raiders defense, they're just terrible against the run. So I expect Phillip Lindsay to get a majority of the touches, and maybe DaeSean Hamilton could get phased out of this, this game plan. All right, number 29, Larry Fitzgerald. Whether it doesn't matter who's playing. I do not care who's at quarterback. They can bring back Kurt Warner. They can do whatever they want. Bring back Carson Palmer. I don't think it's going to make a difference. I'm leaving Larry Fitzgerald at 29. The Cardinals' offense is done for the season. Moving on to number 30, Josh Reynolds. The only wide, goodness, you know what they need to do, okay? This is what I love about the Rams' offense. They're so one-dimensional in the idea that, okay, we lost Cooper Kupp. Okay. We got to scramble. All right, throw Josh Reynolds in there. Only throw it to Josh Reynolds. Only throw it to Josh Reynolds. What do you mean? Why are we only throwing it to Josh Reynolds? If we want to feed the number 3 wide receiver the ball, why don't we put Woods at the number 3 wide receiver spot and have him run those routes? Why don't we do that? Why don't we do us all a favor and have that go down instead of having to feed this younger guy the ball, in which, he's been okay, but Jared Goff's not doing any favors either. He's not Cooper Kupp, guys, but he's decent. At least he's getting some sort of targets. He should have scored a touchdown last week, but it was, for you Gurley owners, you're happy, but he was 1 yard away from that touchdown. Number 31, Curtis Samuel. Of all the receivers on that Panthers team without Cam Newton, I think Curtis Samuel has the best chance of being able to produce. So we just threw him on the board. he's a lower number. I'm not really trusting too much. Same thing with Corey Davis. Don't really trust him. I think it's a run-first offense for those Titans, so not really trusting him. He's my number 32. 33 is Golden Tate. 34, Nelson. 35, Humphries. 36, Ridley. Okay, just looking at these last couple names, really just don't trust these guys. Can I trust Golden Tate? Not really, but does he have value? Sure he does. Okay, I mean, you're playing against the Texans, and if Nick Foles wants to find Golden Tate in the slot, he can go ahead and do so and maybe potentially have some sort of value. But, Jordy Nelson's looked good in the last couple of weeks. Can he do something? Sure, he could. But is Derek Carr going to show up and end up making some plays? You never know. In the same vein, it's literally the same story as Adam Humphries. Is Jameis Winston going to show up? Can he figure it out and feed the ball to him? Calvin Ridley, he caught the ball 4 times last week, but it was for 40 yards. That's nothing we're too impressed by. These are just guys that really just. I'd rather just play a running back at the flex. Period. I'd really just rather play a running back at the flex. A running back at least gets more touches or at least more guaranteed touches, even if they're a second string. I'd rather play like Darren Sproles. At least I have the upside of a touchdown. Or if it's a shootout, we'll get Darren Sproles out of the backfield catching a couple balls, Anyway, that's pretty much it, everybody. A little bit shorter video, but either way, I'm tilted, man. There's been so many inconsistencies in fantasy football. But that's the sport, right? That's the entire thing. That's what makes it fun. Anybody can win. That's why people play. You could have been projected to lose by 30 last week, but guess what? You ended up winning by 25. Why? Because players get injured. Players play terribly. The game plans, if you end up going up 28-0 in the first half, you think you have to score in the second? No, not really. If you have it under control, your defense plays well, you can take your foot off the gas and just relax. But either way, these are my thoughts as of right now. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comment section. I'll be sure to answer them. I probably won't get there before Thursday. We want to talk about the Thursday night matchup really quickly. So the Thursday night matchup for this coming week, just talk about players. And wait, do we not have a Thursday night game this week? You're kidding me. What? Wait. Oh, no. We don't have Thursday night football tomorrow. Oh, no. What am I supposed to do tomorrow? Just talk quarterbacks? No. Oh, goodness. This is terrible. Wait, why didn't they just move at least one of the Saturday games to Thursday? I guess they're just trying to give people rest. All right. So be it. No Thursday night game. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. We're going to be talking quarterbacks. Either way, man, that's unfortunate. I wanted to watch some football tomorrow. Okay, I guess we're watching NBA. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And until next time, thank you very much. See you.